Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, fellow consumers, where you are in policy making, whether you are in a regulatory, whether you are in business, whether you are in legislature, judiciary, whether you are in civic, whether you are in any form of engagement that supports your livelihood and supports the livelihood of people all around you. We would like to welcome you at Consent in partnership with Humanist Media Africa. We would like to welcome you to yet our other in series, the TV series on consumer empowerment and better business. We are greatly honored to partner with Humanist Media Africa through their Humanist TV Africa, always to bring to you this program on Friday to discuss and bring on issues that would need to empower the consumers and the consumers to also demand and drive and steer businesses to do better and be better for them. So today, I'm greatly honored to be joined by my colleague, Bernard, and also to thank our producer, Dennis, and our main host, Paul Katom Kasa, wherever he is in the UK, for always coming in to join us and also guide us on how best we can serve. So having said all that, I'm greatly appreciative to our colleagues, the management of Humanist TV Africa. Today, we are digging into other aspects of sustainability. We will always continue with sustainability, and today we are looking at sustainable lifestyle at stake and asking ourselves, what will we eat tomorrow? And the issue is, this question is for us all. What we are going to share with you today as curtain riser, as a catalyst of discussions in your private time, in your policy making, in your advocacy, in your call to action. Today, we would like to look at this subject matter from many spheres, from many angles, but to open up and start our deliberations, also looking at the issue, why is sustainable lifestyles at stake? They shouldn't be at stake because the world we live in needs to sustain us. We're looking at one health aspect where we have to look at ourselves as individuals, look at animals, look at the environment, look at the crop, the diversity that sustains, look at the systems, the approaches, the utilization of all of these enablers. So we find ourselves as consumers in dilemma. We find businesses are in dilemma because they have to continuously feed us. And we find that the planet is in dilemma. That's why we are saying sustainable lifestyles at stake. And one of the aspects that I would like to start with, I would love to look at the General Assembly of the UN in September last year. They looked at and they came up with the Pact for the Future, Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration on Future Generation. And one of the aspects that I really liked as I was looking at the Pact for the Future, I wanted to just read and relate it, looking at what the heads of state pronounced themselves on and proclaimed. We, the heads of state and government, representing the peoples of the world, have gathered at the UN, United Nations headquarters to protect the needs and the interest of the present and future generations through the actions in this pact for the future. We are at a time of profound global transformation. We are confronted by rising catastrophes, existential risks, many caused by choices we make. Fellow human beings are enduring terrible suffering. If we do not change course, we risk tipping into a future of persistent crisis and breakdown. Yet this is also a moment of hope and opportunity. Global transformation is a chance for renewal and progress grounded in our common humanity. Advances in knowledge, science, technology, innovations could deliver a breakthrough to a better and more sustainable future for all. The choice is ours. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thought that this could do a good curtain rising for our discussion. And I know my colleague Bernard, when he comes in, he will be also able to revolve around looking at our choices. Why are we saying that sustainable lifestyles are at stake? This is grounded in our choices as consumers, the biggest socioeconomic grouping that drives the economies, that drives markets, and that drives government. So if our choices are not sustainable, they make the sustainable lifestyles, put them at stake. And like this, the statements of the heads of state when they were looking at making the pact for the future, looking at the global digital pact, the present and the future generations. This is time we need to dig deep and ask ourselves, what will we eat tomorrow? What we will eat tomorrow is a question for us all. But we are using food as a foundation. We are using food as a launch pad, because food being a foundation for life, food being the fuel for productivity, we need to have it safe. We need to have it of quality. We need to have it in adequate quantities. And if we are not having it in those few parameters, and isn't what we are going to eat at stake, isn't our sustainable lifestyles at stake if we are unsustainable? So this is where today we need to look deep, basing on the future, the pact for the future, where the heads of state in their respective countries, so that we have made choices, but some of the choices are detrimental to the future, to the present and the future generations. And this is where now we need to ask ourselves, from different theories, from different aspects, from different approaches, socially, are we sustainable? You'll find that when we look at our social behavior, our social choices are giving us unhealthy diet. Many of us were facing non-communicable diseases due to the choices we make, where we are not doing responsible consumption as consumers, and where businesses are not doing responsible production. Their productions impacting consumers, their production impacting the environment, where waste is emitted in the natural resources that sustain us. We end up we are taking social decisions. As consumers, we are making choices given the economic aspect. We have resulted to consumer preferences that are ending up not to be healthy, unhealthy diets, unhealthy activities. Where we are required to do physical activity, we cannot do physical activities because of development, where we should have green paths. The green paths are turned into shopping malls. That is where consumerism is making what would be sustainable lifestyles, putting them at stake. So the social impact, the economic impact, where as consumers we make unsustainable economic decisions, where we overconsume, we spend, and we run in debt. So that makes us to live unsustainable lifestyles, putting what we will eat tomorrow at stake. Just imagine when you're over indebted, will you afford a healthy diet? When you are over indebted, will you be able to save for your future? Will you be able to make right decisions for your family or your kinsfolks? So looking at the choices that we make, then we look at how we impact the environment. We started with social. We went into the economic aspects, but our social and economic aspects go in to impact the environment. I was listening to a radio program as I was preparing for this program today, where they were talking of shea butter in Uganda being impacted by climate change and even policy. That the shea nut butter trees are now being cut down for charcoal. So that means our choices for using charcoal as energy to prepare our food is depriving us of shea butter, which is an ingredient good for our health, an ingredient good for healthy soils and sustainable environment, an ingredient good for animals, an ingredient good for the ecosystem. But because of our social choices, our economic decisions, and also in policy, where policy does not facilitate or even scale up consumption of sustainable, clean energy, then we end up cutting down. I've just brought one example, cutting down the shea tree, which gives us a product that has got vast benefits. Let's go to technology. Still, it will link in very well. New technologies are bringing in clean energy. But are we having, as countries, policies that facilitate clean energy, which clean energy will not impact the environment? it will facilitate food production, which clean energy will facilitate processing at post-harvest, drying, processing, and having quality infrastructure from which the food that we are going to consume and the byproducts of that food or that will come out in processing can be integrated back into the environment. Do we have that technology? So all of these aspects that we are looking at, using one aspect, what will we eat tomorrow, touching back and forth systematic approaches that we need to look at as society, as homesteads, as state government, to make policies that will make sustainable lifestyles not to be at stake, to be able to provide for what we will eat tomorrow from a sustainable agri-food system. We need to transform. Having looked at technology, having looked at the social aspects, looking at technology, looking at the environmental challenges, the environment being impacted by our choices that should be responsible, and production that should be responsible is impacting the environment. Then it impacts us economically, because the economic burden of our unsustainable social, technological impact on the environment become a burden of the economy. You'll find that the health sector becomes a burden because consumers, we are sick. What we would have saved goes into the health budget. We are consuming unhealthy foods. The environment is unhealthy. The technology is unsustainable. It doesn't provide responsible production and leads to irresponsible consumption. And this is where it leads us to politics, policy, legal and regulatory frameworks. Are they providing? Are they in tandem? The pact that I referred to, the pact for the future, we, the heads of state and government, that is politics, it's the executive, it's the governance that provides policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks that need to facilitate sustainable lifestyles, for them not to be at stake, to be able to answer what will we eat in future policies. That's why we need to call to action any policy coming into place. Do we invest resources in it and we don't implement? That will be wastage. Do we have policies that are wholesome, looking at our social aspects, looking at technology, looking at environmental, looking at them economically, so that we can have economic transformation that is sustainable, that is not affecting, production and productivity, that facilitates growth and development sustainably, leading to resilience. Having said all that, are we ethical? We need to nurture a quality culture. We need to nurture quality governance. We need to nurture quality production. We need to nurture quality consumption that is sustainable. Our policies ethical. Our productions ethical. We find that a number of unethical practices are impeding our sustainable lifestyle. The green, where we would have done physical activities, where we would have rested to have mental stability, are all cut down, and there are concrete structures that continue to pollute. We need to coexist with infrastructure. Infrastructure in smart and sustainable cities and communities needs not to impede the well-being of the people, need not to impede production, need not to expedite or increase poverty. It needs to bring about equity, bring about innovations, employment, not impeding life over and underwater, not impeding partnerships. All these are key. Are we ethical? So you'll find that some of the unethical practices that are leading to food fraud, for example, will lead our questioning, what are we going to eat tomorrow? Is the food, if there are policies that will guarantee the safety of the food, its quality assurance, its marketability, is food sold from a good environment? You see, the environment in which our food is produced, consumed, determines our benefits once we finish consuming the food. If the food was contaminated before it entered the soil, it is contaminated due to unhealthy soil, it is contaminated post-harvest, it is contaminated in processing, it is contaminated in marketing, it's contaminated in cooking, it is going to contaminate our bodies. What will we eat tomorrow? That is the question that we all have. And that's what some of the heads of state recognized by saying we need to come up with a pact for the future. Our choices today, our policy choices, are they impeding the livelihoods? Are they impeding the One Health approach, where we have got healthy consumers as humanity, where we have got healthy environment, where we have the crops, the diversity is healthy, to facilitate both domestic and wildlife, to promote equity? All this requires the aspect of being ethical, being humanistic, being genuine in all that we are doing, from duty bearers, right holders, businesses. All these aspects are very key. And like the heads of state, as I come up to my conclusion as of opening and request Bernard to come in, when we look at all of these, the heads of state say, we believe that there is a path to a brighter future for all of humanity, including those living in poverty and vulnerable situations. Through the actions we take today, we resolve to set ourselves on the path, striving for a world that is safe, peaceful, just, equal, inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous. A world in which well-being, security, dignity, and a healthy planet are assured for all humanity. Just using this statement, it takes us back to where we started. And this statement alone, will it give us sustainable lifestyles? wanted to put us sustainable lifestyles at stake. This statement doesn't it crack that and give glaring gaps? What will we eat tomorrow? Is there safety? Is there peace? Is there justice? Is there equality? Is there equity? Is there inclusiveness? Are the processes sustainable to lead to prosperity? Having a healthy planet assured for all humanities? So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my long prelude to the discussion today, but leading us, giving an eagle-eyed view, looking at all aspects from a social perspective, looking at technology, environmental, economic, political. Politics is the foundation of all these other aspects. Policy, legal and regulatory frameworks, are they ethical to deliver the social well-being, to deliver innovative technology that can be sustainable and lead to sustainable life? Are they ethical to provide the environment that we can live in as in one health? Will it lead to economic well-being? Those are questions for us all as we continuously grapple with sustainable lifestyles, looking at them, whether they are at stake or not, and asking ourselves the question of the foundation of humanity: what will we eat tomorrow? This is a question for us tomorrow, for us all. So, ladies and gentlemen, respective governments, respective continents in their paths, and then the global world, like I've just read from the General Assembly, have got aspirations. But like we discussed before, we need to aspire for zero waste. We would love to see this global pact for the future that was agreed upon during the General Assembly going to waste. Like we have food, loss, and waste. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know Bernard might not touch something on nutritional waste, but jokingly, Bernard, you're most welcome to join in and share your perspective on the topic today. Thank you. Bernard, the floor is yours.
Yes, Mr. Chimera, thank you for sharing with us. Now, usually when you share now, there is nothing else to share. Everything has been mentioned, so I would say that literally there is nothing new that I have to share. But of course, you've really given us a wider perspective of things, and my role is really to give us. I want to speak like now a consumer, away from the politics, the governance. So as a young man, anyhow, so we really want to welcome our viewers again to this episode, and of course to our Catholic friends. We condole with you for the loss of the Pope, who has been actually behind loving the environment, talking about sustainability. Actually, has been a key figure in that in what we are discussing. Actually, looking at issues of sustainability, looking at the future, looking at building the environment to make sure that sustains people here now and in the future. So, as we are reflecting on sustainability and we are reflecting on what we are going to feed on in the next few days, I want to keep reminding our people of the concept of sustainability usually, so that it helps even our new viewers to follow through. So we agreed from the principles that the actions or the things that you are doing as an individual, or that we are doing as a people, or that we are doing as a country, how are they impacting on our social life? How are they impacting on our environment? How are they impacting on the economy of the country or your household economy? So if whatever you are doing is contributing negatively to your social life, to the economy, and to the environment, then there is a problem. It means that you cannot then use it again and again tomorrow. And we agreed that everything that you are undertaking currently, do it knowing that, first of all, it is sustaining you, it is making you live and live well, but also without compromising the ability of the future generation to actually survive on their own. So, is what you're doing actually able to sustain you now? Is it able to sustain your children? Is it able to sustain the children of your children without actually compromising their ability to actually live? So that is what we are basically discussing, the aspect of sustainability. Use it now, but don't compromise the people who will come after you, making sure that people who will come after us will also use the resource that you've been using, and also they leave it for their other generation. So that is sustainability that we are talking about. Now, I want now to dive into a little bit of the choices we make. When you look at the choices that we are making currently, are they leading us to that sustainability? Are they leading us to economic sustainability? Are they leading us to environmental sustainability? Are they leading us to social sustainability? So I am going to focus our presentation to food. Now let us look at who feeds the world actually. It should be a question that we need to attempt to answer. Who is feeding the world? Is it the farmer? Is it the soil? Is it, who is feeding the world? So when you look at the production systems that we have currently, they will determine what we are going to eat tomorrow. So let me basically look at the food value chain, or maybe the food system itself. Which kind of seed are we giving to farmers to plant? If the seed is not sustainable, it means that we are already affecting what people are going to eat tomorrow, because people are not able now to produce food, and you keep seed for the next season and for the next generation. Why? Because of misusing science in the name of probably producing GMOs with the intentions of controlling the seed sector. We also know already that there are companies, there are organizations that are actually manufacturing seed, and so they have sovereignty over that seed, which is unethical, as Mr. Chimera was talking about. It means that the future food will depend on the manufacture of the seed. And yet, we used to have the farmer managed seed system where every farmer was managing seed that has kept us up to now. Where did we get this selfishness of thinking that you are the only person who can make seed for the whole world? And yet, seed has been here thousands of years older than you are. So that is misuse of science to think that you have to be sovereign over the seed that people are supposed to produce. I know that in the past we've been having seed that is nutrient dense, and the farmer has been producing it from season to season through generations, and that has kept our nutritional stance up to date. So when you come up with science and you misuse it, an ethical misuse of science, and you tend to take away the seed and you start manufacturing seed that fits within your context, it means that you are only looking at your financial, I call it financial impunity actually. So you keep on producing to get wealth at the expense of the health of the people. So what is it that people are going to feed on tomorrow if you don't allow them to actually replicate the seed that they have been having over the years, proven to be more nutritious and saving them from costs of medication? We also note that there are people who have come up with industry producing seed, which seed you must apply, for instance, fertilizer, you must apply pesticide, you must apply like 4 or 5 times during the course of the season. And thereafter, the same companies go and make, for instance, pharmaceuticals, because they know that maybe after about 20 years or so, if you've been consistently using this kind of products that they have made in the production, you are likely to fall sick. So how sustainable is that system where people are using things to fall sick and they die. So what are we going to give people tomorrow if people cannot have access to their own seed or planting material? So we're talking about before farm. What is happening before farm? So whenever you're talking about sustainability in the food system, we need to start there. Having understood, we know that currently there are chemicals, for instance, that we are now using. Instead of digging, we are using a chemical to dig for us, to plow the garden. You don't need to go to the garden and start plowing or to dig or to remove the bush or whatever. Just pour a chemical and everything will happen. The question is, how does that chemical that you are pouring on grass to dry affecting the life of the microorganisms in the soil that are actually supposed to be supporting you in fixing nitrogen in the soil naturally? So what went wrong? So if we don't address such things and ethical issues of that nature, we are likely to stop producing food that is actually giving life to people. And when that happens, it means that we are going to start producing something that is seemingly food, but actually not food. So you're literally not producing food, but you're producing something else, which I will come to later. So when you look at the production system, people go to plant food. Remember, the seed is synthetically made somewhere. And secondly, we are now looking at which kind of chemical are we using in the production. So we end up having highly hazardous pesticides being used in the production of food. And science tells us, the same science tells us, that highly hazardous pesticides are very dangerous to the environment. And actually, because of overuse of of chemicals, actually, highly hazardous agrochemicals, we have the risk of climate change. We know that everyone is talking about climate change, but people are thinking that climate change is all about cutting down the trees. No, it's about the misuse of the chemical compounds, which actually God destroyed the ozone, and then they leave the ozone bare, and then we start seeing ozone gases. We start seeing high heat, temperatures are very high, erratic rains, and that affects production of food. So you see the unsustainability starting to build slowly, and that means that at that point we are going to reach a point when we cannot actually sustainably even produce the food that we are even talking about. So if you cannot produce it now, what is the future going to look like? There is a problem, because it means that in the future you have nothing to produce. Why? Because the climate change issues will have come because of misuse of agrochemicals earlier in the current generation. A lot of misuse. I have seen people with planes in the air spraying all over. And when you analyze the chemical being sprayed, is highly hazardous, killing microorganisms in the soil, killing organisms in the air, destroying the air, destroying the ozone, and climate change comes in. So the same scientist says we are making a product or a plant that is resistant to heat, which heat they have created. So you see that there is a lot of mismatch in reasoning science. Science is supposed to give us solutions and minimize the risk of challenges. But when we see that science is creating more challenges actually than the need, then there's a problem. So when it comes to what are people using in cultivation of food, in production of food, it gives us a perspective of what we are supposed or what we are going to eat in the near future. Now, we also know that misuse of agrochemicals can affect the health of the people who are actually the farmers, and these are the people producing the food. So just imagine a life without a farmer who is actually feeding the entire world on their sweat, production of food. And the farmers are getting the cancers, the farmers are getting sick, the farmers are dying. Where is the food going to come from? We need to rethink the actions that we actually undertake in production of food for us to determine the nature of the environment that we are living in, the nature of the soil that we are using, the nature of the water. The previous discussion, I kept telling you that a lot of agrochemicals have been found in water bodies, but the water bodies are actually carrying food. We know that in the water bodies, that's where we have the fish and other edible animals. But these are actually feeding on the chemicals that are actually flowing with running water into the water source. Some of you are even dumping waste into the water bodies. And which waste is this? A lot of methane, a lot of, all the waste you've generated in the household, you're pouring it in a water source. Or you're waiting for the rain and then you pour it with running water. But where does it end? It ends up in a lake, it ends up in a river. And what is in that river? The fish we eat, the shrubs. Other people are eating crabs, other people are eating fish, other people are eating all those animals in the water. But what is it carrying? It's carrying poisonous elements which are very destructive to human beings. So these are the farmers who are supposed to produce food. These are the consumers that are supposed to buy our food. So there's a whole mess that we need to think about every time we are reasoning about sustainable kind of solutions. Now, what about now you have the food? I've taken you through the production and the pre-production. What choices do we have when it comes to processing of the food? What equipment are we using? What equipment are we providing to the processors to actually process the food? Many other times when all our food processing machines are actually not food grade. This is the time we are seeing a lot of processing, ultra processing, where actually food, which was brought to the processing unit as food, it leaves the processing unit as something else. Something without nutrients is not food. Anything that is not having nutrients ceases to be food. So when you look at the machinery we are making, the level of processing we are putting on our food, what we are calling value addition, some people call it value addition, but actually when it's not value addition, you're not adding anything. What you're adding is reducing the quantity so that you can pack it in a polythene. But what is it carrying? Is it having nutrients? If we start having ultra processing, you just alter even the food component, it means that in the near future, people will be eating food which is not carrying nutrients. So literally, people will just be eating nothing. So you end up eating, I don't know how to call it because literally it has no name. And that's why you see currently, because of the choices we are making, words like junk food have started coming in the picture, which we used not to have. So every time you hear, today I'll eat junk food, maybe to have a quick definition of junk, if you just go to the dictionary or you look at the noun or verb of junk just basically means useless. So every time you're saying, well, I'm going to have junk food, you're saying, I'm going to eat useless food, something that is not adding value to you. But where is it coming from? It is coming from our food system, which has been so processed to a level that we have decided to do ultra processing to the highest level. And this is the choice that consumers are taking. So you decide to have highly processed foods every now and then, every time you've lived. So what is going to happen to your children? Our children are going to learn that you can only eat highly processed food for you to be a human being. Food that has less or no value at all. And so what happens? It means that you're going to have malnutrition increase in terms of micronutrient deficiencies. People don't have sufficient blood, people are anemic, people have no zinc, people have no iron, people have no calcium, and so you find that people are just there with the burden of disease. And also what is likely to happen is that the more we consume ultra processed foods, the more we're going to suffer challenges of obesity and overweight. And when that happens, you are a candidate to non-communicable diseases. And when they come in, it means that productivity is going to be minimal because people are less productive. They are always in the hospital. They are sickly. They are spending a lot of money, etc. Why are we spending all this money? Because of unsustainable choices that we always make. And that can affect the food system as much as possible. The other aspect that is likely to happen is that because of the nature of production, our food that used to be very nutritious, we now call it extinct. Food, can you imagine food getting extinct? They start telling you that a community X, maybe let me use an example of Uganda. If you go to Fort Portal area, Kabarole, you'll find there are communities that used to produce millet and sorghum. And it was a daily meal that every household had millet or sorghum because of the nutritive composition of those foods. And if you go to places like Mwenge, there's a place called the Mwenge. It has more professors, sharp guys, used to eat millet, used to eat mushroom, used to eat. Now, currently, getting a mushroom is mysterious. Getting millet in that community is out of context. Why? Some of those foods used to just appear, like mushroom. It just used to appear in the community, and yeah, but because of overspraying, overusing agrochemicals, whatever, you can hardly see them. So it means that we're going to have a shift in the dietary kind of. So our diets are going to shift a little bit, not even a little bit, they're just going to shift because we have, first of all, distorted the environment, we've distorted where the food was coming from, we've distorted, and so you cannot have these foods. And people have run away to start producing foods because of economic reasons. And you hear a government talking about industrial agriculture, which is it would be a good idea, but it is wrongly positioned. So you find people having monocropping and everybody goes into producing a high value crop. But the fact is, the high value crop is not even being consumed in the community where it is being produced. So whom are we producing for if we, the producers, can actually not eat this food? This is where my problem is. Most of the areas in Uganda where food is produced massively, they have the highest prevalence of malnutrition. What we call the food baskets in this country are actually suffering most from malnutrition. You wonder what is not happening because people are literally producing for commercial and they forget themselves. Imagine somebody who has avocados, hash avocados. Now it is the song here. Everyone wants to pronounce hash. Hash avocado is being produced. Very good. Get a lot of money. But what are you buying after hash avocado? People then, you sell off 10 tons of avocado and then you go and buy the bread. You go and buy highly processed chapati or something, but you've sold your quality food. So when you're positioning agro-industrialization and you're looking at high value crops, we need to reason, what are people eating? Why do we promote food production for export and yet the community that is producing the same food is sleeping hungry? So we need to think about it. What are we going to eat tomorrow if we cannot maintain sustainably our soils, our air, our environment, our water? And these are the areas actually that are giving us the food. If we cannot manage our choices in front of our children, what are those children likely to eat? I have always made fun that women, girls, what they eat at their home is likely what they're going to cook when they go into marriage. So what practices or choices are you a parent now when you still have your children is going to determine what they're going to feed their also children later in life. So the choices we make can make us suffer locally. So what I want to say here is that we are likely to see an increase in obesity, an increase in overweight. For instance, reports have shown that in Kampala, 50% of the women here are already either overweight or obese. The report was published last week in a newspaper. And actually, your boss has already produced that kind of evidence. Now imagine 50% of women in Kampala are obese. What is likely to happen to their children? It means time is going to come when you're talking about 75%, because their children are also eating the way their parents are because of the environment, the conditions around. So what choices are we making in selecting the food, in selecting the lifestyles that we are living? That is contributing to what is going to have a challenge with our diets. Now, the other challenge is, how do we make choices in food preparation? Why would you make a choice to prepare food with engine oil? Because you want a profit, you're a street food vendor. Why would you choose to prepare human food with transformer oil? Why would you make a choice to actually smear tomatoes with a chemical for the consumer to come and pick it? Why would you make a choice to prepare human food along the waistline or the trench or the drainage line? Why would you make a choice to actually prepare human food in polythene bags? The choices that we are making when we are handling food or when we are dealing with food, they predetermine what kind of health implications the people or the consumers are going to suffer from. No wonder a lot of cancers, no wonder a lot of diabetes, no wonder a lot of hypertension, no wonder a lot of strokes, no wonder a lot of heart disease, no wonder a lot of so many diseases, even those whose names we do not know. Why? Because of the choices that the farmers, the processors, the transporters, the people preparing the food, and the consumers we are making. So the entire food system choices determine or are determining our fate. So as a people, we need to reunite, come back to our senses, and start developing solutions for all of us. We need to go back to the drawing board and start rethinking our food system. We start rethinking our choices that we make along the value chain of the food that we are eating. Remember, it is food that is making you who you are. You are because of what you eat. So if we don't rethink the entire food system, how food is being dealt with from pre-production up to after the plate, then we have a challenge. After the plate, we would be thinking about, okay, you've eaten this food, so what? What next? Which choice are you making? Are you sleeping? Are you having sedentary lifestyle? Or you are trying to make sure that you're actively doing physical activity? That is after fork. Or you've eaten food, so you've left a lot of batch of food on your plate. Where do you throw it? Why are you throwing it? How are you reusing or recycling this kind of food to make sure it doesn't become waste that is going to generate methane, that is going to generate greenhouse gases, or that is going to rot in the dumping site and collapse on people? Guess what it is. So you need to rethink our choices. How sustainable is the choice that you're making? When you're going to buy food or you've finished eating food and then you're putting food in the polythene bags, where are you throwing those polythene bags? Why can't you get an alternative for a polythene bag? Why can't you use a bag instead of a polythene? Why can't you use a bottle instead of maybe a glass bottle instead of a plastic? Where are you discarding these wastes? So you see that the issue of waste becomes another challenge altogether when we stop handling food the way we are supposed to handle the food. When we start generating a lot of food waste, when we start having a lot of food losses, when we start doing all these messy things that we are seeing over left, right, center, it means that we are compromising the lives of the consumers. Mind you, even you who is doing those dubious practices, by the way, you are a consumer. I've always told you, a vendor in the market who has just put a chemical on the tomato to sell the consumer, they forget that they're also going to consume it in theirs using the same hands that were actually touching the chemical. So you realize that we need to think, all of us, we are consumers. Whether you are the seller, whether you are the farmer, whether you are still going to consume that product that you are poisoning. Last evening, we were shocked actually today in the paper, one of the newspapers in Uganda, indicating that a community in one of the districts, Kwen, people have started because of hunger. People are now trapping, I think, marabou stocks. And so they are using alcohol and mixing it with rodent poison. So then they trap them. So when this marabou stock comes to feed on whichever trap they have put there, they suck the drug, but the drug is having a poison, so they are not able to fly. And when they're not able to fly, the people are able to collect them, hit them, and eat and start cooking them. But remember, this is carrying a chemical, a rodent poison, and is carrying alcohols. So that is a choice that the community is making. So that's how they are killing the birds to feed themselves. But what kind of choice is that? So which choices are we making to select the food that we are eating is something that we must question every now and then. So as I conclude this whole thing, is that now, what are we going to eat tomorrow? Given these scenarios that I've given, I see us eating a lot of poison, running away from eating food to running to eating poison. So remember, consent says that if it is not safe, it is not food. So if you produced food in your reckless means that I have described above, we are not likely to consume food but consume poison. And when we consume poison, what is likely to happen is that most of us are supposed to die. And when we are supposed to die, where are we going? Even our bodies, are they even able to make manure for the soil, or we are just going to poison the soil more? So I see us, if we don't change, if we don't reason out and improve our systems, our consumption systems, we are going to start eating poison in the near future. Secondly, what are we consuming? I see that we are going to start looking at eating a lot of junk, which junk is going to cause disease, of course, obesity, overweight, and then non-communicable diseases. So why should the food, which is supposed to give us health, now cause us disease? Because of the choices that we are actually making. I see us eating junk in the next few days because of the poor processing and the mess that we are trying to create in our children. We are likely to have junk away from poison. Now imagine having poisonous junk, my friend. There's a whole of mess. Imagine you having a poisonous junk. So you have a disease from the poison and another disease from the junk. So at the end of the day, where are you? Are we going to be productive? Is our economy going to grow? Are we going to have children who can reason, think, and innovate? Are we going to have the future? So this future we are talking about, is it even there anyway? So it is until we change our food system, start reasoning out things sustainably, that we are going to have the future. Otherwise, we are likely to stay without the future. So, Mr. Chimera, those are some of my reflections, and I would wish that we need to reflect our future from the way we produce food, the way we think about the food system, the way we make our policies, the way we are very deliberate and we are very intentional on the production systems, on the consumption systems, on our sustainability for now and the future. Otherwise, we are likely not to have the future, or if we have the future, we're going to have a sick future, or if we don't have a sick future, we're going to have a dead future. So we need to rethink about all these things, put them together, and reason as a people, reason as a country, sustain ourselves and the future of our children. I want to thank you, Mr. Chimera, for the opportunity, and I hope these reflections can add value to the discourse. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Bernard. No, you see, when you gave the last example of the marib stock being poisoned, it took me back to the earlier, the One Health. So just imagine the marib stock becomes a food producing animal or bad. So if it consumes something unhealthy, as consumers who are going to consume it, who intended to capture it through intoxicating it and poisoning it, we are going to be intoxicated and poisoning in turn. Is that sustainable? Is that One Health? What will we eat in the future? Is that a sustainable lifestyle? We need to coexist. So, Bernard, you raise very key issues, and which key issues lead me to one of the aspects that we have at Consent, where it's a sustainable consumer. For food to be food, it needs to be safe. And as one of the consumers, as we draw into conclusion, safe food for now, safe food now for a healthy tomorrow. We need information, we need awareness, we need to educate ourselves, we need to adapt a quality culture, we need to adopt sustainable processes where we also have no food loss and waste. That is aspects of one of the elements of a sustainable consumer. We need to be critical as consumers to have a sustainable lifestyle and knowing what we are going to eat tomorrow. What can we do as consumers? We need to eat healthy as rural and urban sustainable consumers. We need to seek information, knowledge on how to prevent things that will affect us. We do not need to waste resources. We need to practice sustainability. We need to adopt agroecological practices as a lifestyle, sustainable approaches. We need to keep clean We need to prepare our food in a safer environment, cook them thoroughly, keep food safe, separate the raw and cooked foods, use safe water and raw materials. That's being critical. When it comes to doing responsible consumption for sustainability, we have to have pleasure on the plate, but safety in the mind. We need to join we need to improving the health of self, the one health we are talking of. We need to improve the health of self as a consumer, the health of plants, animals, and the environment to do responsible consumption. We need to adopt responsible consumption where we have no loss and waste. Say no to irresponsible production of food, goods, and services. Adopt responsible production through quality culture and systems like agroecology, other sustainable energies, sustainable approaches of production that are renewable, that are nourishing the environment. So, consumers, as we conclude, I would like to share with you sins of humanity, sins, sins against humanity, and they are 12. I don't remember the author, but I find them very, where it says sins against humanity, and I put dash consumers. One, politics without accountability affects consumers. Two, wealth without work affects consumers. Three, enjoyment without conscience makes consumers irresponsible. Four, knowledge without character affects consumers. Five, business without morality affects consumers with fraud, poor quality in goods and services. Six, science without humanity affects consumers with immoral and no inclusiveness. Bernard alluded to science earlier. Seven, religion without compassion leads to inhumanity and it affects consumers. Eight, rights without responsibility leads to unsustainable consumer who is irresponsible and promotes irresponsible production. Nine, power without accountability results into unsustainable local, regional, national, and international decisions and frameworks of not walking the talk. 10, development without sustainability leads to unsustainable agri-food system, providing consumers and environment products and practices unhealthy to consumers, economies, and the planet at large. Lastly, laws without justice leads to unsustainable communities, leading to hopelessness, impeding innovations, freedom, inclusivity, humanity, equity, and growth. So, ladies and gentlemen, having raised those sins against humanity dash the consumers, it leads me to another aspect where I would conclude by a call to action. It is noted that by 2050, we will need to feed 10 billion people on the planet, where 30% of arable land is degraded. 35% of food is wasted, and climate disasters threaten harvests. The choices we make today will determine whether future generations will inherit scarcity or abundance. And this relates well with the General Assembly Pact for the Future. And to call to action to all of us listening in and watching, in the pact, the heads of state said, in the pact, I wish to read a paragraph or a section of a paragraph. To that end, in this pact, we commit to 56 actions in the areas of sustainable development and financing for development, international peace and security, science, technology and innovation, and digital cooperation, youth and future generation, and transforming global governance. These are questions now we call to action. You call our respective states and governments. Tell them, cognizant of all our aspirations and countries, we did commit, you committed us to that global pact, the pact for the future. Are we, as a country, doing this? And another extract I wish to read as I conclude. As heads of state and government, we will not accept the future in which dignity and opportunity are denied to the half of the world's population, all become the sole preserve of those with privilege and wealth. Can you imagine that? Those are big statements where, as consumers, as businesses, as right holders, we need to call the duty bearers. Do they recall this statement? All of you listening from on the African continent and the other global world, during the General Assembly, the heads of states and government committed to this. They are not going to accept a future in which dignity and opportunity are denied to half of the world's population. So I hope that this rhymes and aligns well, so as the foundation and engines of consumption and better business, we need to call to action our governments as duty bearers to lay in place frameworks for sustainable lifestyles and putting in place actions that will guarantee what we will eat tomorrow. I would like to thank you very much for tuning in, for listening in, watching us, and I would like to thank Humanist Media Africa with giving us the opportunity on the Humanist TV Africa always to share. And I would like to say until next Friday, I would like to give Bernard the last word, and we'll call it our week's series done. Bernard, you can give your last word, please.
Thank you, Henry, for summarizing everything. And I think that, of course, as we call it off, I want to call upon my fellow scientists that, of course, science must as well be sustainable. We should provide scientific solutions, but these scientific solutions must as well be sustainable. If you're bringing on board new varieties of crops, they must be sustainable in nature. If you're coming out with new technologies, they must be sustainable in nature. So let us not use science as an scapegoat for something else. I think we need to use science more sustainably so that it helps the environment, it helps the people, it supports to address the needs and the challenges of the future, the current and the future generations. So I think my fellow colleagues in the science space, we need also to think about scientific science, rather scientific sustainability. How sustainable are our solutions? Thank you so much, and we start there on Friday.
All the best. I wish you a superb weekend, and we look forward to being with you. Cheers and bye-bye.